James Myers.
And I'm Reverend Avia Byers.
Coming to you live from Ghana, West Africa.
Yes.
Ghana, West Africa. And this evening we'd like to say first thank you to everyone who has visited us on another edition of Let's Talk Torah. So this evening we are going to begin with Leviticus chapter 16, 17, and 18. Which will cover atonement and then the temple, the location of where sacrifices should be given, and then chapter 18, which will cover relationship between husband and wife, and all of the relatives. As we get into it, it will open up a little more. But it is the prescribed relationship between the family unit.
Yes.
All right, so chapter 16. And what we'll do, because there's three major topics here, we will do our best to get through everything, but if we can do a bit of a summary, the chapter 16, the whole chapter 16 is going to be about atonement. So I will hit a few verses that give us the total summary of chapter 16. So with the very beginning, verse 1 and 2, and Yahweh spoke to Moshe after the death of the two sons of Aharon, as they drew near before Yahweh and died. And Yahweh said to Moshe, speak to Aharon, your brother. Do not come in at all times in the set-apart place inside the veil before the lid of atonement, which is on the ark, lest he die, because I appear in the cloud above the lid of atonement. With this, Aaron should come into the set-apart place with the blood of a young bull as a sin offering, and a ram as a sin or as an ascending as an ascending offering. He should put on the set-apart linen trousers or shirt, and the linen trousers on his flesh, and gird himself with the linen girdle, and be dressed with the linen turban. They are set-apart garments, and he shall bathe his body in water, and shall put them on. And from the congregation of the children of Israel, he takes 2 male goats as a sin offering, and 1 ram as an ascending offering. And Aharon shall bring the bull as a sin offering, which is for himself, and make atonement for himself and for his house. And he shall take 2 goats and let them stand before Yahweh at the door of the tent of appointment. And Aharon shall cast lots for the 2 goats, one for Yahweh and the other for Azazel. And Aharon shall bring the goats on which the lot for Yahweh fell, and shall prepare it as a sin offering. But the goat on which the lot fell for Azazel is caused to stand alive before Yahweh, to make atonement upon it, to send it into the wilderness to Azazel. And Aharon shall bring the bull of the sin offering, which is for himself, and make atonement for himself and for his house, and shall slay the bull as the sin offering, which is for himself, and shall take a fire holder filled with burning coal of fire from the slaughter place before Yahweh, with his hands filled with sweet incense beaten fine, and shall bring it inside the veil. And he shall put the incense on the fire before Yahweh, and the cloud of incense shall cover the lid of atonement, which is on the witness, lest he die.
Mhm.
And as it continues, it talks about sprinkling the altar 7 times, the horn 7 times. Verse 16, as he's making atonement for the set apart place, the altar, his family, himself. This is the process by which he is to act as high priest.
Mhm.
This is the very beginning. We like to say shalom to our guests. Thank you for joining us.
Yes.
This is the process by which Yahweh is setting up Aaron as high priest. Now, keep in mind, this is the very beginning of the children of Israel who are coming out of the wilderness, no longer in Egypt, but now at the foot of Mount Sinai, and they are getting ready. This is preparation where they would go into the wilderness for the next 39 years and all of the events that took place during that time. So, with that said, that is the major thrust of chapter 16, the time period, verse 29. And this shall be for you a law forever in the 7th new moon, or the 7th month, on the 10th day of the new moon, you afflict your being and do no work, the native or the sojourner who sojourns among you. For on that day he shall atone for you, to cleanse you, to be clean from all your sins before Yahweh. It is a Sabbath of rest before you, and you shall afflict your being, a law forever. So this is, again,
Not the Day of Atonement.
is the setup of the Day of Atonement, which takes place in the 7th month of the Hebrew calendar, not the Gregorian calendar, but the Hebrew calendar. And is very specific to even the day, the 7th month on the 10th day of that month. And so, as Yahweh has given us the timeline,
Right.
who and who's leading us through, which is Aaron, the high priest.
Right.
And so today we do have such a high priest, which is Yeshua.
Mhm.
Yeshua being our high priest, there is no change in the timeline. It still operates in the 7th month on the 10th day.
And understanding that that is the day of Yom Kippur,
It
the
is.
day of the covering. That's the word. Kippur means to cover. And so that's what he does with his blood. His blood covers our sins and
Right,
covers
right.
us. Covers us as a people also. Looking at this Torah portion, and at the end, 34, he says, and this shall be a law, this shall be for you a law forever, to make atonement for the children of Israel for all their sins once a year. And he did as Yahweh commanded Moshe.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a law forever. So if we claim to be the house of Israel, then there will always be a day of atonement as a day of remembrance that we are covered by the blood of Hamashiach, who atones and is our high priest, as spoken of in Hebrews. What is it, Hebrews 11? Him being our high priest.
Yes. Now, this is very important because when it says a law forever, that means it's still valid even to this very day. So with that said, when Yeshua HaMashiach returns to us, can you imagine how important that we are observing this time and this period of time. Matter of fact, this is one of those periods of time that if you don't do it, it carries a penalty of death. And so anyone who does not afflict their being shall be cut off from the people. So it is a bad time to be cut off from the people. When Mashiach returns, this law will definitely be a memorial to when Yahweh spoke this, which is back in the at Mount Sinai. It's a covenant that is lifelong. It's eternal. And so anyone who chooses to not observe this particular time, your name will not be written in the Lamb's Book of Life, which is also dangerous. Which brings us to, well, the last point I'll say, and as it says in verse 31, it is a Sabbath of rest to you, and you shall afflict your being a law forever. So as this is a Sabbath, if you never observe this, that's an annual Sabbath, plus there's the weekly Sabbath, you've been missing in action. If no one has taught you this, well, it's been right here in the same scriptures for hundreds of years. And so we are at fault if we have not recognized this yet.
I made an error. So Hebrews 11 talks about, having faith.
That's the faith
belief.
chapter.
Yeah, Hebrews 4 is where it talks about Yeshua being our great high priest, making atonement for us. So that refers to him there, that he is set. And then 5 also, Hebrews 5 also talks about him being our high priest. So this Day of Atonement, what he's speaking of right here is really important. And if you do away with any part of it, you're doing away with the finished work that Hamashiach did on the stake. So we have to be very careful, especially in that presumption that we're no longer under the law. So because all the laws are about him, and they're all built around the foundation that was laid in the beginning. Yeah, so I just wanted to correct that. That was Hebrews 4, chapter 4, and Hebrews chapter 5 talks about him being our high priest, of being our atonement, who makes atonement for us.
So chapter 17 takes us into the next subject matter, verse 1. And Yahweh spoke to Moshe, saying, speak to Aaron, to his sons, and to all the children of Israel, and say to them, this is the word which Yahweh has commanded, saying, any man from the house of Israel who slays a bull or a lamb, a goat, in the camp, or who slays it outside the camp, and does not bring it to the door of the tent of appointment, to bring an offering to Yahweh before the dwelling place of Yahweh, blood guilt is reckoned to that man. He has shed blood, and that man shall be cut off from among his people. In order that the children of Israel bring their slaughterings, which they slaughter in the open field, and they shall bring them to Yahweh at the door of the tent of appointment to the priest, and slaughter them as slaughterings of peace offerings to Yahweh. And the priest shall sprinkle the blood on the slaughter place of Yahweh at the door of the tent of appointment, and shall burn the fat for a sweet fragrance to Yahweh. Verse 7. And let them no longer slaughter their slaughterings to demons after whom they whored, This is a law forever for them throughout their generations. So, opening chapter 17, Yahweh gives us a law concerning sacrifices, how, when, and where. And so, how is by a very compassionate sacrifice where the blood is not excited or the animal is not excited and rushing through the veins. But the sacrifice has been raised by your family for 1 year and then brought to the priest, as he says. So now we know what and when. Brought to the priest at the temple, and the priest and yourself are to carry out the process. And this is to be done at the door of the tent of dwelling, or the dwelling place where the altar was the altar of sacrifices reside. And so, with that said, this is the law that was set, where sacrifices cannot be given any place other than what is prescribed by Yahweh. Right now, where we are reading the mobile temple, so wherever the temple is, but at the door of the temple in front of Yahweh. But when the permanent temple was erected, then it could no longer be anywhere else other than where the temple itself reside. And even to this very day, this is still important because there is no longer the temple. The temple was destroyed. Once the temple was destroyed, which was in the middle of the week, then temple sacrifices came to an abrupt halt. And so
I think you should explain when you say the middle of the week.
This is from the book of Daniel. The book of Daniel talks about when you see the abomination of desolation that takes place. And this again is prophecy that has gone past, actually. So it's past already, where when you see this taking place, then in the middle of the week, temple sacrifices will no longer be. And what happened is the temple was destroyed in the middle of the week, just a little bit more. Remember when Yeshua was to be crucified, he was at the age of 33, and they was wondering where was it that he was going, that they could not go. And he told his disciples, he says, you will go, but not now. And so right now you must stay here and do what? Feed the sheep. And so where I'm going, you cannot go with me right now. And this is what he was talking about. In 40 years, they would then follow him because all of Jerusalem would be burnt down. And once Jerusalem was burnt down in 70 AD, this was the finished work that was started at the cross or at the stake. And the explanation of when you see the abomination of desolation in two parts in the middle of the week. And so 70 AD, which is a measure of 3.5 and 3.5. So you take 7 days or 70 AD. We take Yeshua's lifespan, his lifetime, and he did 3.5 years, 30 plus 3.5, right? So he did half of the week with us with a promise to return and do the other half. So then there's two parts to that abomination of desolation. The other half must be done in this generation that receives the Mashiach. And so again, when you see the abomination of desolation, this is the abominable one who desecrates what he's not supposed to desecrate, which at that time was the standing temple, and then it was burned. But for us today, it's the other 3.5 that stands out, that points to the abomination that defiles the memorial of the temple, because now we are the temple.
Okay. So when you say 3.5, because I see where people could get very confused and not understand what you're saying when you say 3.5 weeks.
Okay, there is a period of 3.5 years that the scripture says time, times, and half time. So Daniel, right, the book of Daniel goes through it. And as the book of Daniel goes through the timeline, you have chapter 7, chapter 9, chapter 12. Each of these will give you portions, but chapter 9 will really go into it and talk about the 70 weeks. There is a period of 70 weeks, and then the Mashiach would be cut off at the 69th week. So really it's like 69.5, of which now Daniel is told, unless you complete this 70 week, the destruction that Yahweh has planned for the earth will take place. And so the other half week that is left, so if Mashiach was crucified at week number 69.5, that means there's only a half left, which is time, times, and half time. So this is how we read the woe, and woes.
So looking at it from the standpoint of the creation to now, I guess is how I make it make sense in my own head, that Yeshua also came within the middle of the week, the middle of the 7,000th year. He came in the 4,000th day, or the 4th day, which would be the middle of the week. You have 3 days before and you have 3 days after. 3,000 years before, 3,000 years after. And he came right in the middle.
Right. Which is actually the 4th day.
The 4th day.
Right.
Which that may help give a little understanding to where we are in the timeline too, and how close we are to the destruction of that Father Yah, as the church likes to call it, the Lord's Day. Yes, we're getting ready to experience the Lord's Day, Yahweh's Day,
which is a day of vengeance.
That's not a day that you're going to be jumping around seeing Jubilee, but it's going to be a day where when Father hides his people, we want to say shalom to Moray Douglas.
Shalom, my brother.
Shalom,
good to have you in.
We miss y'all so much. Tell Prophetess we say shalom, shalom. We love her too. So yeah, that whole middle of the week is really, really important to understand in the timeline and where we are in the scheme of things. That we're out of time, y'all. We're out of time.
We're actually out of time.
We're out of time.
There is a verse in the book of Zephaniah. I want to relate to something for you really quick. So that means 2 verses I got to show you. There's one in, I think it's Matthew chapter 5, verse 5, where it talks about the meek inheriting the earth.
Mm-hmm.
Is that
Right.
correct? Okay.
Mhm.
Then
Let's
there's
start with
Zephaniah.
meek, because they shall inherit the earth. Zephaniah.
So
Zephaniah.
Zephaniah chapter 2 and verse 3 is the key, but we have to start at verse 1.
Oh. You sure it's not Zephaniah chapter 1?
No,
Okay.
it's
Okay.
Zephaniah
Is that
chapter 2.
coming of judgment 2?
Mhm.
Okay.
And start at verse 1.
1. Okay, gather together, O nation without shame. Before the law gives birth, the day shall pass on like shade. Before the burning wrath of Yahweh comes upon you, before the day of wrath of Yahweh comes upon you. Seek Yahweh, all you meek ones of the earth, who have done his right ruling. Seek righteousness. Seek meekness, if so be that you are hidden in the day of the wrath of Yahweh.
So who will be hidden? The meek, the
Those
righteous.
doing righteous.
And so when he says in Matthew chapter 5, verse 5, when he says, the meek shall inherit the earth, Israel don't have to go through this judgment. They have been humbled already. In, let's see, is that Deuteronomy chapter 8, where he says, I allowed you to experience thirst and hunger to humble you. So when he says the meek shall inherit the earth,
yes,
it's the people. So that's it.
Yeah, 8 and
Okay.
3. And
Go ahead.
And he humbled you and let you suffer hunger, and fed you with manna, which you did not know, nor did your fathers know, to make you know that man does not live by bread alone, but by every word that comes from the mouth of Yahweh. And that's a quote. That's Yeshua quoted that.
Exactly.
The word quoted that.
Exactly. So
the bread, the manna quoted that.
How important is this?
Yeah.
This is Yahweh speaking to Israel in the wilderness.
Right.
They come out of Egypt on wings of an eagle, but they walked. So it seems like to me, whatever the manner of transportation is of that day is how they will come out, how we will come out of the nations and be protected. According to Matthew chapter 25, it will be as 10 virgins, foolish and wise. The foolish are stuck on the outside when the wise go in and the door shuts. And this is the meek, those who have been walking in righteousness. When they come out again, they inherit the whole earth.
Again, I want to read from Malachi 4, verse 1 through 4. And it says, For look, the day shall come burning like a furnace, and all the proud and every wrongdoer shall be stubble. And the day that shall come shall burn them up, says Yahweh of hosts. which leaves to them neither root nor branch. But to you who fear my name, the Son of Righteousness shall arise with healing in his wings, and you shall go out and leap for joy like calves from the stall, and you shall trample the wrongdoers, for they shall be ashes under the soles of your feet on the day that I do this, says Yahweh of hosts. Remember the Torah of Moshe, my servant, which I commanded him in Horeb for all Israel, laws and right rulings. And then he goes on to say, see, I'm sending Eliyahu or Eliah, the prophet, before the coming of the great and awesome day of Yah, and he shall turn. See, we come in the spirit of Elijah or Eliah, and he shall turn the hearts of the fathers to the children, and the hearts of the children to their fathers, lest I come and strike the earth with utter destruction. So this turning the hearts of the children to the fathers. See, we were given false fathers by the church fathers, Constantine, Eusebius, St. Thomas Aquinas. Those are not Calvin. Those are not our fathers. Our fathers are Abraham, Yishak, Yaakov, David, Moshe. Those are our fathers, Shemuel, Yosef. Those are our fathers.
Moshe.
We don't accept the fathers of that made
Roman
up
Catholic Church
Christian belief, because it was made up. Yeshua would know absolutely nothing about that if he was to return right now to Durban. He wouldn't know anything about what they're doing. He would know nothing about. And many of them wouldn't even accept him because they wouldn't even know, they wouldn't even realize who he is.
Now that verse 2, it says, but to you who fear my name, the Son of Righteousness shall arise with healing in his wings, and you shall go out and leap for joy like calves from the stall. So in other words, there's going to be healing in this time, that even our lifespan is going to be restored to that of our forefathers, ancient forefathers.
Absolutely.
So we will be renewed in our physical being, that we will live very long lives. Now, without going into all of that, I want to just point out, it says, but to you who fear my name, the Son, S-U-N.
Right.
I understand what they printed and why they printed that. But it's the same as let there be light.
Right.
It wasn't the S-U-N,
Right,
but the S-O-N. So it's the rise of the Son of Light, understanding, enlightenment, because the S-U-N is not so much that it comes with healing in its wings. We don't speak of the S-U-N in that way, but we do speak about the S-O-N in that manner, that he shall come with healing in his wings. So I just wanted to point that out, that even though they are trying to say the S-U-N, but it's evident that that is not correct, but the S-O-N. But at this time, the Mashiach has not yet been manifested. So their interpretation of this scripture is not yet manifested as it should be. But we who are after the period of time that the Mashiach was crucified, we do believe and know that he is the S-O-N and not the S-U-N. Matter of fact, neither one of those verbs would be in that title, because you have a summit, I would say, or whatever the S sound is being produced, and then the N, noon. And so whatever they used for going back to the original language, Shamash.
No, Hamash
Hamash.
is the sun.
Okay.
I mean, I'm sorry, Shamash.
Shamash.
Shamash, right. I'm sorry, it's the sun. So it would be
well, we would have definitely
Shema,
the S and the N. The U for the sun or the O for sun is not written in the Hebrew. So you must translate according to the original word in order to come up with what the intent is. But again, we don't really have to even, argue that point. We know it's not the S-U-N that has healing in its wings, but the S-O-N, who will come with healing in his wings. So we'll just kind of leave it right there.
Right, the shin, right, Shamash, yeah. But it means the same thing. It's the light. It's
Right.
That's what it's talking about. The light of righteousness.
Right.
And we
know it's not the S-U-N,
right,
which is not the light of righteousness.
Of righteousness, exactly. But it's the Shamash of the menorah, which is the servant candle.
Right.
Which we know would be the light of the world, which is HaMashiach. Right.
And so that's a major portion of chapter 17, besides the eating of blood. Now, just to mention that so that we can stay on point, it says in verse 10, any man of the house of Israel or the stranger who sojourns among you, who eats blood, any blood, I shall set my face against that being who eats blood, and shall cut him off from among the people. For the life of the flesh is in the blood, and I have given it to you upon the slaughter place or the altar to make atonement for your lives. For it is the blood that makes atonement for the life. And so how important is this? Instead of him saying, we must die, but there still must be a death, he says, I've given it to you